me tell you somewhat about Telex. I think that little box on the bottom left there explains it, but we really are a market leader for interconnection and network-rich, carrier-rich co-location services. We've actually created a platform for those that want to come, whether you have connectivity, you own connectivity, a network provider, or a connectivity provider, whether you own content, whether you're a software as a service provider, or you're somewhere else in that ecosystem to connect with each other. And that is one thing that has changed, and I'll start out that what has changed in the carrier hotel world is it used to be a place for networks to come to interconnect with each other. Now what you're finding is it's a place for those to come that want to take content and deploy it across multiple networks, as we heard this morning in the keynote session. So if I'm a hosted software as a service provider and I want access to multiple networks and to the eyeballs, I can come into a Telex facility and through a simple cross-connect or through a peering connection can get access to all those networks and to those eyeballs. So very different. It's not just a place now for networks, and we'll talk more about that. Key differentiators for Telex in that middle section there. Number one is locations. We chose to go to the network-rich, where the fiber is located, dense urban markets. We also chose to go where many of the submarine cables land inside the Telex facilities, and we continue to expand those locations. So for example, in New York, where we just took down additional space, we now have 50,000 square feet of space under management in that city, the largest provider of interconnection services in New York, and I'll show you on a slide why that's important in a few minutes. But we also look at other key strategic locations here in San Francisco, 200 Paul. If you think about the Asian marketplace and where many of those networks come in, obviously if you think about the content owners, the social networking companies here in Silicon Valley, resident in Santa Clara as well as in 200 Paul. And then of course in LA. Dallas was also a strong market. As we look at marketplaces, Dallas and Chicago, probably two of the strongest locations, the strongest markets. Dallas more for things like business continuity and disaster recovery applications, but also network density, and Chicago for things like proximity hosting, connectivity, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and others. So clearly locations is key, and as we continue to expand, and today we announced an expansion in Chicago, we'll continue to expand in those locations and fill in some other places both here in the US as well as internationally. The second differentiator is the global marketplace. We have 700 plus customers. In New York, we have 400 plus network providers alone. But as I mentioned, we also have those that own the content, those that distribute the content, the end-to-end ecosystem within the Telex facilities. We have about 21,000, 22,000 cross-connects. On average, that's about 35 cross-connects per customer. So that's the highest in the industry. And a key driver behind that is that ecosystem. And on the next slide, I'll show you kind of an example of that ecosystem and why it's so important. But we also help to bring customers together. So if you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 network provider, or you're a local access provider, or a CLEC, or you're a content owner, we can help bring folks together to create an application or create an offer for you and extend your reach. And then the last thing is products and services. As I mentioned, interconnection, co-location, network-rich. An example of what we did in that space just recently is we opened a second facility in Dallas, Texas. It's more of a high-powered facility. But what we did is we connected it back to our premier facility, our carrier hotel in downtown, where there's 60 networks through a DWDM ring. So now, if you put your servers and your hosting infrastructure in our second location in Dallas, you still have access to those 60 plus networks. Some of the things that are on that slide are just kind of showing you some of the other new recent expansion. We also just jumped into the IP peering exchange directly. We've always had those in our facilities by launching the Telex Internet Exchange. We bought the Atlantic Internet Exchange in Atlanta, and we also launched our own switch in Phoenix, and we just brought on the first couple of ports on that. We've also decided to offer Metro Cross Connect, so long haul between facilities. You can see some of those there. And then our virtual exchange product, which I think is great for folks to come leverage our capital. So why, if you're an international carrier, why go deploy your own muxing equipment in the States? We've already deployed that in our facilities and leverage our capability to do protocol conversion, to do muxing, demuxing capability on our dime, just take a port versus going and have a capital expenditure. And we'll continue to expand the value proposition with added services and bundles of services. We do remote hands, but you won't see us, Telex, going into things like cloud computing and the high-end managed services. Yeah, I mentioned that we own New York, and that's a bold statement, but we do own New York. We have the A and the B location, the two premier carrier hotel facilities, 60 Hudson Street and 111 8th Avenue. And as you can see, we've connected the two there, once again with dark fiber, so a customer can have full business continuity and disaster recovery by buying a wave between the two facilities. And we're also connecting that to our Weehawken facility and our soon-to-be-announced New Jersey facility. But besides owning New York, this is just an example of that ecosystem, that global marketplace that we've created. On that upper right-hand box, we've always, our heritage are the network providers. And whether it's tier 1, tier 2, local providers, wireless providers, companies coming in for wireless backhaul into the Telex facility, those folks have always been there. We then started getting into the enterprise market. And this is really where they just woke up and started realizing the benefits of coming into a meet-me room, a carrier hotel. And then that bottom right is some of the sample financial clients. They wanted that benefit of, once again, taking out that local loop, having a better ROI, and being able to have the diversity of these hundreds of networks. So they started coming in, and then the interesting thing was that they needed to get to those financial exchanges. So low latency, the term proximity hosting, sub-millisecond transaction capability, and those started coming to the Telex facilities. And then of course they also wanted to get to the sample information exchanges. So, one of the key takeaways I would tell you is the carrier hotel is no longer just for the networks. It is the place, the evolution to where enterprises, content owners, those that host software as a service are going to come to leverage these type of ecosystems to be able to offer an end-to-end service. So that's a little bit of example. I could put the same example up for the media and entertainment space and show you folks and the content owners, the folks that distribute the content like the CDNs, as well as those in the ecosystem that do things like content egress and ingress and digital content management. 2 minutes on peering at Telex. As I mentioned, we just jumped into the peering as a Telex offer. So up on that left-hand part of the circle, Phoenix being the first IX in the market. We did a lot of research on that. We already had a interconnection facility there, but decided it definitely was the opportunity with customers there like Limelight and Cox and others that could really leverage having an IX in that marketplace. And then in Atlanta, we bought the AIX, which many folks didn't hear about. It's doing about 8 gigs of traffic a day, so it's not that tiny, and it has a considerable number of customers. But also, we do give access to others, and that's the beauty of peering, having been in the space for many years. So you'll see folks up there, like someone will say to me, well, isn't Equinix and PAX a competitor of Telex? Or Terramark, my good friend Josh down there, a fellow surfer who I just recently met. And no, it is a community. And so coming to a Telex facility, you can get out to the PAX, you can get out to Equinix. And the same thing on the voice peering exchanges. Obviously, to Stealth and our hosts today with voice peering fabric, but certainly TNS and Interroute and others. And that's part of our opportunities to leverage and give folks the ability to get to these exchanges within a Telex facility. So last slide, where's the industry heading? We heard a lot about some interesting stats this morning in the keynote. I used the same Cisco growth percentage there, 46%. But I don't see any slowdown in this marketplace. In fact, I see things like the explosion of HD video, consumer-based, enterprise-based, machine-to-machine communications, which I thought was interesting, was mentioned this morning, which is actually growing faster than that in terms of CAGRs, all things needing to communicate. All of those can hub in a Telex facility, and we're once again prepared to have the space, the power, and the connectivity options for that. The new submarine cables, I mentioned that. Considerable new cables are being built during the next 3 years that have been announced. They come into a Telex facility, they need to branch out. So if you're, once again, one of the providers of those, getting to the local providers here to connect you with in the U.S., obviously advantageous in our Miami or California or New York facilities. And the last thing, once again, talking about what's happening out there in terms of the growth in the data center space. While I will tell you, we're not a traditional data center provider. We will, offer up to 150 watts a foot. We're not doing 300 watts a foot. We are a place for folks that are coming in and putting a point on their wide area network, and then your major financial houses have put their comm gear in a Telex facility, but they're also now putting their IT infrastructure in a Telex facility to connect to it. So we really think we're well positioned in a bunch of the marketplaces, location-wise and in the verticals, to support these growing applications. And look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.